It is an honour to stand here today as the leader of the Nationals WA. It's an honour that cannot be dulled, even though for the first time in just under a decade, we gather at our state conference in opposition. To assume the mantle of leader and set the course for the next chapter of the Nationals is a great privilege, not because there is great power or accolades or personal gain, but because I hold this party and the people who underpin it in the highest of esteem. We are an organisation with 100 years of history and a singular and noble purpose. I am born and bred in the country. It is my home, just as it is yours. I love the patchwork of diverse towns and cities that make up this great state. I love the sense of place and purpose these communities have, the dogged and enduring desire to survive and thrive for future generations. There is fierce pride when one of their own succeeds, and compassion and support for your neighbours and friends in times of tragedy and despair. To me, the Nationals embodies the values and the morals and the ethos of these communities. We had a motivated army of door knockers right up to election day, volunteers that manned the pre-poll for 3 long weeks, and polling booths, fundraising. We knocked in signs and we rallied support. We had a van load of young Nats in the Young Nats van, covering more kilometres than I can even dare to imagine. And these young Nationals, led by the boy from Bruce Rock, Lachlan Hunter, generated a buzz wherever they went. Your genuine enthusiasm for what you were doing was infectious for our candidates. You brought an energy when people were feeling flat and the grind was getting too much. And we thank you for all of that time that you put in addition to all of the other things that you do in your lives, to make sure that people understand that we are a vibrant party that stretches from the youngest to the oldest in our community, and we thank you very much for that commitment. I, for one, as leader of this small but mighty party, could not be prouder of the way that our team approached the campaign and election day itself. The adage that our constituents don't expect us to win every battle but do require us to get a blood-nose trying underpinned our resolve going into the most difficult of elections. And it's fair to say, as James said, that our noses have been bloodied in this last campaign. Make no mistake, the Nats have been here before, and so many have predicted our demise. But when the chips are down, the Nationals thrive. We find that extra gear. We find a new gear. We pick ourselves up, we dust ourselves off, and we flick ourselves back into the fight because we know no other way. Some commentators will say, get used to it, you're going to be here for a while. I don't accept that. I don't accept that modern governments run in 8-year cycles. I can't, and we here today can't. We can't because every day a government is in power without Nationals MPs around the cabinet table is another day that our constituents suffer. Regional Western Australia suffers. We owe it to our constituents to never take a foot off the pedal, to take no day for granted. And as far as I'm concerned, we spend not one more day in opposition than we are legally obligated to. This party, more than any other party in Western Australia's political landscape, has the ability to make a true difference in people's lives. For our metropolitan cousins, a change in government probably means little change in their day-to-day lives. The bus still stops at the bus stop, the hospital still opens, the trains still run, their world rolls on. Ours doesn't. Regional development is hard, and we ran that agenda hard while we were in government. The ORD, water for food, investment in residential colleges, schools, innovative juvenile justice programs, attraction and retention incentives for our police officers, a state-of-the-art telehealth system, aged accommodation, mobile phone towers. Whether it was the arts, sport, water, mining, tourism, education, health and racing, no portfolio area was untouched by Royalties for Regions. We started to tackle some of the most intractable issues facing our most remote and challenging communities. Terry Redmond led the charge on remote reform agenda, and if it's continued by this current government, it could deliver real and lasting change over time. It's because we made a difference, because Royalties for Regions was worth fighting for, that we make absolutely no apology for the centrepiece policy we took to our 2017 state election campaign. This state is in a unique financial predicament. A mining construction boom, 500,000 people moving into our state, our share of the GST plummeting to an all-time low, the volatility of an iron ore price, and the sector that has knocked holes in the budget that are impossible to predict and manage. And in government, that was our reality for 9 years. Mark McGowan and the new Labor government face exactly the same issue, and aren't they hot to trot on the GST now? To our federal and interstate colleagues who are here today, do not underestimate the level of anger and frustration of Western Australians over the GST issue. Do not underestimate us. We are willing to punish those that do not fight or champion our cause in Canberra. It is smashing our state. It is smashing our state. And in the last state election, we were the only ones that had a plan to try and address that. We were the ones that right back in the day, when Tony Crook was sitting in that federal parliament, brought this to the table and said this will be a problem for our state. If it's a problem for our state, it's a problem for our regional communities, because we are the ones that are hit hardest and hit first when that money disappears. This absurd situation that we predicted means we are relying on mums and dads and pensioners and small businesses to fund the state's obligation to provide essential infrastructure and services. And we don't believe this is a sustainable solution. We still need that new revenue source. And in tough economic times, we need to make sure everyone is paying their fair share. So we don't resile from our pursuit to modernise those legacy state agreements of BHP and Rio Tinto. They must reflect current industry and economic practices. We acknowledge that the mining companies, including BHP and Rio Tinto, have created many jobs, and they contribute to the communities that they operate in. The Nationals are not and have never been anti-mining. We understand the value of the sector and the principles on which investors make decisions. Wendy Duncan led the charge to protect the gold sector when talk of changes to the royalties emerged for their sector. We championed and introduced the Exploration Incentive Scheme. We've been at the forefront of revitalising the towns and the regions that these companies operate in, where their people live and work. We make them attractive and desirable places to be. But these companies are operating under outdated state agreements, and they have provided preferential conditions and incentives for many years. Our concern in relation to these state agreements is not new. It's not novel. Our interest is broader than just the outdated special lease rental charge. There are obligations like downstream processing and maintenance of essential community infrastructure in these state agreements that have been commuted or ignored or unmet. Obligations that were the state's dividends for granting permission for these companies to process our ore. But the economic landscape is forever changing, and the return our state receives for our finite resources must reflect the times and the level of investment the WA taxpayer has made to facilitate record mining activity. And at a time when the Commonwealth is suggesting that we will lose another $2 billion in GST because of a population decline, the fiscal situation that our state is now facing is actually becoming a crisis. It's time for the McGowan government to show some backbone. He must bring those miners to the negotiating table, and they don't need to rip up the state agreements. This can be negotiated, but it will take some intestinal fortitude. And if he doesn't, and they don't show this, then there's a problem, because without a new revenue stream, our state is in dire straits. At the very same time that Western Australia teachers, nurses and police are having their pay slashed, and mums and dads and pensioners are grappling with power prices that have gone up by 11%, Rio banked $4.16 billion from its Pilbara operations from a 6-month period. A new revenue source for our state would allow us to stabilise the state's finances in the short term, and it would eliminate the need for us to borrow money to pay our teachers and nurses and keep the lights on. The Premier has yet to outline why he thinks it's fair that 2 of the world's most profitable mining companies are still paying that special lease rental charge at the rate it was set back in the 1960s. He's yet to explain why he will break a promise to police officers for a fair pay deal, the people that serve our communities and make them safe, but will stand steadfastly beside Rio Tinto and BHP. The premise of our argument remains correct, regardless of the result of the election. The efforts that you put in to support our members of Parliament, watching our leader day after day after day, be pilloried in the media, be challenged by the commentators, be pushed back on everybody that thinks and thought that they knew best. That was not in vain. And this party was brave enough to put it on the agenda and lead the charge because we knew what was coming. And now the political commentators and the public, they are starting to realise that our prediction of this pain for the hip pockets of every household and business, is about to become a reality under a Labor government who came to power with no financial plan. And we know from bitter experience that when there is no financial plan and the pressure is on government and the savings are to be found, that it is from regional Western Australia that they look to first, because it is harder to do business in regional WA, it is more expensive to do business in regional WA, and you need to work hard at regional development. As a smaller party, we must be attuned to change more so than others, and we must stay relevant to the people who give us the privilege of representing them. But we must also be comfortable in our own skin. We are the Nationals. There is absolutely value in having a singular focus on our regional communities and their issues. These are issues that may not make the nightly news. It may not resonate with the commentators, but without us, they are issues that would be neglected and relegated to the too hard basket. Who else is going to champion for an aged care solution for our wheat belt? Who else is going to fight for the Esperance TAFE, the sports stadium, Geraldton University's complex, or Muresk? Who else is going to tackle an ambitious agenda like water for food? Who else will back those communities in the Pilbara, in the Kimberley, in the Gascoyne? Who else is prepared to take on the issues that the other political parties shy away from? We have never been afraid to meet these challenges head on, and this will not change. The Nationals did not achieve what we have by accepting our lot as a bit player and making up the numbers in Parliament. We are not a spent force, we are here to stay. We believe in the value of standing on our own 2 feet, and we seek no validation other than from those people that put us here. We take responsibility for our decisions and our policies, and our constituents expect no less. In 4 years' time, we will look back to the 2017 State Conference in Esperance and we will say, there. That was where the next great chapter began. That is where we started our journey back to government. Make no mistake, we are not going anywhere. Your members of Parliament are ready for the fight and we will not be taking a backward step. It is too important and we don't have the luxury of time. We need to be working on this now, and that's why days like this are so important. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.